I have to tell you how powerful the internet and social media is. False information can spread like wildfire online, but that doesn't necessarily mean that censorship is the solution either. Because as China's recent actions show, the power of censorship is all too often used to silence dissenting viewpoints. Joining us now is CJ Pearson, a young conservative who knows something about having a major online presence himself. So, CJ, when we look at the younger generations, right now TikTok is in the news, but it's not just TikTok. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all these different social media platforms. How effective is that in creating a narrative among a group of voters?
It's incredibly effective. You look at the popularity that Black Lives Matter has largely had. We've seen the protests in the streets, but let's not act as if that happened through any physical means. It happened through that message disseminating through social media. That entire movement has been fueled by a very aggressive social media digital advocacy campaign, everything from those black boxes that they posted just a few weeks ago to organizing protests in cities across the country. It's definitely been a very social media first movement.
And when we look at TikTok, for example, it's a relatively new app. It's something that probably a lot of our viewers even don't know much about because it is a very much so younger audience that generally does use it. But then, for example, I follow Taylor Lorenz. She's a New York Times reporter who covers this type of stuff. And she frequently talks about the idea that there are big conservative movements on that platform. It's not just what we see on example for Twitter, where a lot of conservatives say that they're being shadow banned or silenced or anything like that. On TikTok, there does seem to be a flourishing conservative movement. Is that right?
Yeah, there is. I actually am pretty active on TikTok. I have around 90 or so thousand followers there. And the reason I'm really intentional about being active there is that you're right. Younger demographics love TikTok. All of my friends are on it. I'm 17 years old. And so many, I don't know a single friend of mine who doesn't have it. And it's so important, I think, for conservatives to engage young people where they are. And it starts on by having a presence on apps just like TikTok.
No, I think you're right, because there's an overt effort by those on the left, for example, as you were just talking about, to get young people involved in not necessarily the Democratic Party, but some of the movements that they do support. I mean, you brought up those black squares for the Black Lives Matter movement. You bring up other campaigns, and that is something that demonstrates that these must be effective. Otherwise, people wouldn't be putting so much emphasis into it. So do you think that when it comes to our conservative leaders, or even our Republican leadership as lawmakers, do you think there should be a greater emphasis on not only reaching out to young people, but securing their place on these social media platforms?
No doubt, no doubt. If we allow the left to occupy the entire field, our voices will never be heard. Our message will not be heard. And I always believe that when conservative ideas are given an equal platform to be heard, we win. We have facts on our side. We have logic on our side. We have truth on our side. And I think the more young people that are aware of what conservatism means and what it is, the more they're going to be more likely to it resonates with them, and they're going to come to our side. It is so important for the right to engage young people. The fact of the matter is that I'm going to be a first-time voter in 2020. I'm super excited to cast the first vote of my life for President Trump. But it's going to be a great amount of young people within Generation Z that are going to be voting, and it's so important that we ensure the preservation of conservatism. That starts by ensuring that young people even know what conservatism is, and it's not a fully formed idea, fully corrupted by their liberal professor or their teacher in high school.
And when we generally talk about the younger generation, CJ, a lot of times the headlines in the media is saying that it is progressive. It is something that is more so moving to the left direction. But then there are people like you. There are organizations like Turning Point USA and other young people who are very vocal about their beliefs when it comes to the conservative movement as well. So do you think that that is a false narrative, that the younger generation is moving far to the left? Do you think that there is a little bit more diversity when it comes to political opinion than a lot of people would give the younger generation credit for?
I think this generation is really interesting in the sense that it's not as black and white as it used to be in years past. I think there is definitely a really strong conservative undercurrent within Generation Z. We're sick and tired of cancel culture. We're entrepreneurial. We've seen the success of people like Kylie Jenner and other YouTubers who've emerged as big voices and billionaires even who've built these businesses all on the internet. That's what our generation has witnessed, and I think it's definitely cultivated a strong appreciation of capitalism. But what's so important, and this is a big opportunity that the right cannot miss, is the importance to educate of all of this. The left will often talk about socialism and its benefits and all of these things, and how it's a great equalizer. But we know that not to be true, and it's so important that young people know that as well, and that the fact of the matter is that the stories of Kylie Jenner and all the Kardashians would not be possible if it weren't for capitalism and living in the greatest country in the world.
No, and I think you do bring up a big point too, and it's the idea that especially the younger generation are looking for change in some direction or the other. I think that's why a lot of them, for example, will support Bernie Sanders over Joe Biden, will support President Trump over maybe the more cliche type of establishment figures. I think that is something that is resonating throughout most Americans, but especially the younger generation as well, who is looking for change among more than anything else. I think you're right on to say that. But CJ Pearson, it's a pleasure having you on, breaking down this topic that, to be honest, I don't know much about. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Alex.